Did you know that it is possible to write a book in 10 days? No one is more surprised than I am. It's completely possible, but I say that with a caveat. A book written in 10 days isn't going to be a great book. But if you can live with that, and I totally could, as you might recall,
I love editing.
A 10-day book is definitely possible. Today I'm going to be talking about what I learned from my December challenge, which, if you're new here, was to write a 50,000 word book in the last 10 weekdays of 2022, and give you a little behind the scenes information that might be useful for you to consider if you ever embark on such a challenge, or if you're just curious to know what possesses a person to want to attempt such a thing. I'll give you some background information. I won National Novel Writing Month in November. I also won it once when I was in high school. In the years in between, I have lost National Novel Writing Month an absolutely embarrassing number of years, due in part to the fact that I was doing annoying things like getting degrees. So when I won this year, it was such a rush. It was a rush that I'd forgotten I could feel. Part of the reason it was such a rush is that I started the month pretty convinced that I wouldn't win. And I was behind on my word count for all but the last 10 days. Those last 10 days, not only did I meet my goals, but I exceeded them in such a way that I started to wonder if it was possible to do the entire novel in that time. Around that time, I was also mulling over ways to launch Tightwires, which I started planning back in the spring. Tightwires was initially supposed to be a podcast. I even took a podcast course in preparation for launching it. But the podcast format just never fell into place for me. I wanted to record at least 3 episodes before launching, but after recording just one, I felt like it wasn't going to be very sustainable for me. So I decided to launch it as a YouTube channel instead. I'm not sure what my thinking was there. This isn't that different from a podcast, but because the whole premise behind Tightwires is navigating life post-MFA, I knew I wanted to launch it as soon as I could, and definitely within the year that I graduated from my MFA. And so, as all my friends were leaving town for Christmas and I knew I'd be completely alone in the Ozarks, I thought, what better time to launch Tightwires, and what better way to do it than to attempt something this wild. So I learned a lot through this challenge. Mainly, I learned that if you force yourself to show up every day, 9 times out of 10, you will deliver. And sometimes you'll deliver in ways you don't necessarily expect or want. There's one story that required 2 days of writing and ended up being over 8,000 words long. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that one. It features 2 side characters from a novel I wrote in the past, and the fact that I knew them so well might have been part of the reason I just couldn't stop writing them. But when you're doing something like this, and especially if you're going about it the way I went about it, you have to be flexible and willing to let the writing take you wherever it wants to take you. So I would start every day building a quick outline for the day's story, and then figuring out character motivations for the main character and usually 1 or 2 side characters, if the plot called for additional characters. But as I wrote, I would often stray from that outline. I would not, however, stray from the character motivations I had planned, because I think that aspect of characterization is so important to keep consistent. And consistency doesn't necessarily mean you don't end up surprised by what happens. In fact, I think it's kind of the opposite. If you stay flexible, you always leave room for surprise, but you're more likely to get that surprise in a more profound and meaningful way if you keep character motivation consistent throughout. It's almost like you end up uncovering the story rather than building it. And it's always so cool when that happens. So I asked my Instagram followers if they had questions about the challenge that they wanted me to address in this follow-up video, and a lot of you responded, so thank you for that. But a lot of them were different versions of the same questions, so I'm sorry if you don't see your specific question here, but I tried to be sure I was covering all of them one way or another. And I don't want this video to end up being 30 minutes long, so let's get started. How did you fit writing time into your day? So I did this for 2 weeks during Christmas time, the busiest time of the year. How did I find the time? I don't celebrate Christmas and I work part-time right now, but I didn't have work assignments either of those weeks, so I had literally the entire day. I realize I'm incredibly privileged to be able to say that. Not everyone can just drop everything for 10 days to do something like this, and even if you can, I'd recommend taking a break in the middle, like I ended up doing that first week. Breaks are so important for staying motivated. But I think that maybe some of the people who asked this question or similar questions might be looking for ways to fit more writing time into their days. So I'll just give you my tips for doing that. I set weekly writing goals and daily writing goals. If I don't hit my daily writing goals, I'm okay with it as long as I still hit the weekly goals. Let's talk a bit more about goals. I set goals that are task-based, which I set while I took the HB90 course that I talked a bit about in my productivity tips video. I'll put that on the screen. But I also set goals that are time-based. So I'll say I'm going to get XYZ done this week, but then I'll assess my calendar to see how many work hours I have available for writing and content creation, once I subtract hours for meetings and freelance work. And then I'll divide those evenly between writing and content creation, and I'll try to shoot for those hours. And every day I reassess my available work hours and adjust the week and my daily expectations. I'm fine with the possibility of needing to move hours from one day to another. I do it all the time. I'm doing it today. But overall, I try to forgive myself if it takes me a bit longer to hit my goals, because you can't do better than your best, and by the end of the week, I know I did my best. How did you stay motivated through the challenge? The possibility of failing while doing the challenge wasn't even an option for me. I was prepared to spend all night writing if that's what it took. And the reason why is because I made a very public declaration about the challenge alongside the launch of Tightwires. I knew that if I failed, it would always bother me because it would mean that's how Tightwires came into the world.
A failure.
I think everyone could live with motivation like that at least some point in their lives. I don't recommend doing it often. But honestly, the writing was not the hard part. I made it hard on myself by also tacking on the whole video thing. I had a lot of tech issues throughout, like having the mic fall off constantly, and it took a while to get used to talking to a camera. Every single shot you saw took several takes. I'm embarrassed by that now, but I'm also gratified because video creation isn't easy and it can take a few months to make your first few videos and to learn as much as I did in that time. It felt like I was working 2 part-time jobs. One was the writing and one was the vlog creation. I was pretty much working from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day. But every night when I hit post, nothing beats that feeling. It also really helped that I had just gone on submission with my novel, which, if you're not familiar with traditional publishing, means that my agent is currently shopping my book right now to editors, and I could get a life-changing call at any minute. And I needed a distraction from that. I'm still on submission, by the way. These weekly videos are my distraction. How do you decide which stories make the cut and which don't? Honestly, I haven't started reading through the work I did. I'm a little scared to dig in, if I'm being honest, but I suspected I might feel that way by the end of the challenge. So I tried to remember to jot down a few lines every day, just quickly summarizing the story and whether or not I thought it had potential. But honestly, I think that most of these have potential to be included in the larger collection because they're all roughly in the same genre and dealing with more or less the same theme, which maybe coincidentally is technology and social media and its impact on people. I'm just not really looking forward to editing it all and piecing it all together. But I'm glad I have the summaries to guide me, and once I start that process, I think I'll base the decision on how cohesive the stories feel together, if it feels like a rewarding collection to read through, and whether each story feels distinct enough. I'm really grateful for Scrivener and its outline view for this reason, because I can track things like word count for every story, plus keywords that show me things like the weather and location and time of day and maybe the overall pacing of every story. And I can see it all in like a colorful bird's eye view to make sure each part flows into the next in a way that makes sense and feels rewarding to a reader. If you want to see how I organize my drafts in Scrivener, be on the lookout for a tutorial in March. How was your mental health during all of that? Because I think I would have died. Again, it was Christmas time in the Ozarks, and I was alone. All my friends had left town, my parents weren't visiting, and that's generally been the case every year since I started grad school. Honestly, it's never a good mental health time for me. What I loved about this challenge is that it really left no time for that. Like I said before, I was working from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day. And the one day that I did take off, day 5, Friday, I did feel my mental health deteriorate a bit. And that's why I made the challenge harder for myself the next day. I animated an entire vlog, which was very time intensive. All that to say, if I hadn't been doing this challenge, I think my mental health would have been a lot worse. So I was really happy to have done it. What's next? Are you going to do another challenge? I don't necessarily have any challenges planned right now. I'm on submission with a novel in verse, and I'm editing my second verse novel right now, as well as a larger prose novel. I'm hoping to send a refined draft of at least one of those projects to my agent before the end of the quarter. So I probably won't have much free time to attempt another challenge until after those are done. However, I am thinking of doing something in April for National Poetry Month. Maybe I'll do a poem and a vlog day for the first 10 weekdays. I don't know. Is that too easy? Thank you for your questions. I hope my answers were sufficient and that you learned something from this video that you can apply to your own writing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.